Hello and welcome to this installment of the Delta on the Move lecture series here at the Hong Kong Institute for the Humanities and Social Sciences. I'm Ghassan Moazin. I'm an assistant professor here at the Institute. And as you can already guess from the name of the lecture series, this lecture series is connected to a new project that we're developing at the Institute. Called Delta on the Move, and this project deals with the historical and contemporary development of the Greater Bay Area. And I'm joined today also by my colleague, Dr. John Wong, who is the lead researcher on this project. And in this lecture series, we're generally trying to bring together scholars that work on this particular area and that are related to what we do in this project to give talks to a wider audience. So today we are very happy to welcome to the lecture series Dr. Cheuk, who is an assistant professor in the Department of Chinese and History at City University of Hong Kong. He received his PhD from Oxford University and has previously held positions at Leiden University, NYU Shanghai, and Rice University before returning to Hong Kong. And he works on transnationalism, migration, and inter-Asian connections, and he has really published, has been published very widely, both in academic journals, but also has written quite widely for more general audiences. And we're very lucky today that he's taken the time to share with us some of his current research. The title of his talk is Funny Money, Circulation and Fabric Exports from China to Dubai through Indian Training and Networks. Before I hand things over to Kakin, I should briefly say something about the format of the talk. So Kakin is going to talk for roughly 45 minutes, and then we'll have some time for Q&A. We're using the webinar format. That means if you have any questions for Kakin, please just use the Q&A function in Zoom and submit your questions there. You can do that either during the talk or after we start the Q&A period. So I'm going to monitor the Q&A function, and so at any time feel free to submit questions. And I'm going to read them out during the Q&A portion then, and Kakin can then get back to you. But without taking up any more time, Kakin, if you're ready, please feel free to start.
Thank you, Ghassan. And yeah, first of all, thank you to the Delta on the Move research clusters for giving me a chance and opportunity to present my research in this webinar series today. Yeah, I would like to once again thank you, Ghassan and John, for their very kind invitations. And I would also like to thank other colleagues and friends at the Hong Kong Institute for Humanities and Social Science for the help in organizing this event, for which I'm very grateful. Yeah, I just recently came back to Hong Kong, as Ghassan has just mentioned it. So I'm very looking forward to many opportunities for exchanges or even collaborations with colleagues and friends at Hong Kong U in the near future. So without further ado, I will now share my screen so that you can see my PowerPoint slide. Okay, so the title of my talk today is Funny Money Circulations and Fabric Exports from China to Dubai through the Indian Trading Network. I will begin by offering some ongoing ethnographic observations from my research. In the Chinese counties of Keqiao, where I have conducted long-term ethnographic fieldwork since 2009, Chinese suppliers often complain that Indian traders who buy or help their customers in Dubai to buy a large amount of fabrics through their middleman services always find excuses not to pay on time when their shipment arrived in Dubai. Payment are often made after delays and only after urging many times by the Chinese suppliers, including numerous calls and frequent visits to Indian traders' offices in Keqiao. Although the Chinese suppliers are certainly frustrated by these delays, most of them, however, still trust the Indian traders that payment will eventually come. As I found out from my ethnography and the official statistic that I obtained from the Chinese government, a large volume of fabric are being exported from Kurtao to Dubai through the Indian business networks in Dubai, China, and other related places. These fabrics are often low cost, low quality goods, targeting at the niche market in the global south. In fact, poor quality control, mainly due to the traders' small budgets and suppliers' minimum investment in production facilities, inevitably leads to many confrontations among stakeholders in the low-end global trade. One of the consequences that I have observed in Kurtao is the Indian traders often refuse to pay Chinese suppliers on time, but nonetheless manage to maintain long-term ongoing business partnership with them. It is very common for the Chinese suppliers to take orders from Indian traders in Kurtao, even though these traders still own the supplier's money from previous order. I will explain why and how it can be the case. Drawing on my ethnography, I will map out the very complex intersections of several fundraising mechanisms in the transnational Indian trading network. As my presentation will show, while the fundraising mechanisms in Dubai used to consolidate and enhance the financial strength and flexibility among the large-scale Indian trading corporations, the fundraising mechanism, exclusive in the local context of China, has created a larger space for business survival, even among the grassroots and non-elite members of the diaspora, especially Indian traders who do not have enough capital or money available when they are trying to start a deal with the Chinese suppliers. It will explain why in Kurtao, and very likely also in other Chinese trading cities such as Yiwu or Guangzhou, there has been a large level of tolerance for delayed payment from diasporic traders who come from the global south. And this is how the paper will be organized. Part A is an introduction. I begin by outlining my long-term ethnographic and archival research on Indian diasporic traders in Southeast China. Then I will introduce my field site, Kurtao, a district in Southeast China, where I have been doing ethnographic fieldwork since 2009. In part B, I present some of the key findings of my research. It shows how an Indian diasporic economy have been developing in Southeast China, which is reflected by the gradual expansions of their trade economy and the increased number of Indian traders coming to this small part of China. It reveals the development that the Indian trading diaspora has come together in Kurtao despite the multiple power inequalities within the group themselves. In part C, I will explain how the local institutions and circulations of funding money within China is the key factor in offsetting these multiple power inequalities, thereby playing a significant role in consolidating the Indian diasporic groupings in both the local and the transnational context. So now part A, introductions. I will give a very brief introduction about my field site, Kurtao in Zhejiang province, and my long-term ethnographic engagement with this place. Research has been conducted in and about Kurtao since 2009. My field site Kurtao is a third-tier county-level district under the municipality of Shaoxing City in the eastern Zhejiang province. While still quite unknown to most people in the world, Kurtao actually is very well known by the people who are working in the global textile industries. In fact, Kurtao is called the China Textile City or the global textile capital by people working in the global textile industries. In Kurtao, half of the local Chinese populations, which is close to 600,000 people, are working in the textile trading sector. Since the mid-2000s, Keuk has accounted for the wholesale trade of over 30% of fabrics and other kinds of semi-finished textiles made in China. And about half of these products are exported to near 150 ports across different parts of the world. Now we will have a closer look into the wholesale marketplace in Keuk. In the marketplaces, over 80% of the Chinese companies are small and medium-scale businesses. Most of them are family enterprise. So without any surprise, these Chinese companies, unlike, for example, the state-owned enterprise in China, are not capable of making massive and big investment in their business operations, and they tend to focus on exporting low-budget goods to the global South market in different parts of Asia, Latin America, and particularly the Middle East, with Dubai always topping the list of export from Keuk. Most of these export activities are mediated by the Indian export agents who are based in Keuk. My paper is mainly based on two phases of long-term fieldwork, with one conducted between 2010 and 2012, and another between 2016 and 2017. The study is also based on other short-term occasional visits to Keuk and other related Chinese cities, such as Guangzhou, Yiwu, and Shanghai, throughout the last 15 years, as well as follow-up field trips to India and other places that enable me to trace where some of the products from Keuk end up and who have bought them in the overseas markets. Moreover, I have done archival and oral history research in India, Hong Kong, and China in studying the long-term histories of Indian diaspora involved in this trade and the economic histories of Keuk textile industries over the last 40 to 50 years. I've remained closely in touch with most of my interlocutors through WhatsApp, WeChat, and other means of digital communications, especially during this time of ongoing global pandemic. During the first phase of my ethnographic research between 2010 and 2012, I spent 16 months in Keuk. The second phase of my ethnographic research between 2016 and 17 enabled me to capture the latest developments of a diasporic economy in the context of ongoing changes in the Chinese economy and global capitalisms. Now, part B, I will explore the major characters, the major players of my research, the Indian diasporic traders. Most Indian traders in Keuk identify themselves as Sindhis and followers of Hinduism and Sikhism. Most of them can trace their origin to Sindh province in today's Pakistan. Despite such ancestral connections, none of the Indian traders I have met have ever lived in Sindh or other parts of Pakistan. They were all born outside of Sindh after the partitions of India and Pakistan in 1947, a historical rupture that forced non-Muslim Sindhis to move from Pakistan to India. This marked the beginning of how a large number of Sindhi become permanently diasporic as they could never return to their homelands. The partitions caused a dispersal of Sindhis to different parts of India. After some years, there was also Sindhi remigrations from India to different parts of the world, with Dubai and other places in the Middle East being the most popular destinations. In fact, among my Indian interlocutors, there are a remarkable number who, while still being Indian nationals and holders of Indian passports, were born and raised in Dubai. In the 1960s and the 1970s, some of my Indian interlocutors, their parents and their grandparents, decided to move across the Arabian Sea and Indian Oceans, where long-distance trade continued to boom in port cities like Dubai and Mombasa. According to them, a large number of Sindhis moved to Dubai as workers for the trade companies at that time. This wave of migrations peaked in the early 1970s. In this wave of Sindhi global migrations, family networks and village networks have played a crucial role. Indeed, such intersections between kinship and ethnic business development has been very well documented by the scholarly literature on Sindhi diaspora in recent global histories. And most of them were written by historians and anthropologists, such as Claudine McAwars and Mark Anthony Fassant. The analysis demonstrates that the rapid expansions of Sindhi business networks have been coupled with the global dispersal of their family members across the world. And that was precisely the major strategies that my Sindhi interlocutors used to run their trading companies in different local and transnational contexts. And there were also very important structural and global historical reasons that has made Dubai as one of the most important trading centers of fabrics in the transnational Sindhi business networks. The long-time connections between Dubai and the Indian subcontinent since the British colonial period has made Dubai one of the most popular destinations for mercantile migrations from India. In fact, Indians are the largest foreign populations in the UAE, and a large number of them are Sindhis concentrated in Dubai, forming as Indian extended, as described by anthropologists working in the Middle East, Lihan Rohrer. Such close link between Dubai and India have helped Indian traders, in particular Sindhis, become prosperous in Dubai trading markets. Notable numbers of Indian traders in Kurtal who are very successful in their businesses have their headquarters office in Dubai. Their business cards always show details for both locations. Yeah, these business cards, as you can see on the screen, in a sense is what we understand as the physical manifestations of the traders' claims to be able to be in two places at the same time. So why Kurtal? Sindhi traders started to come to this small place called Kurtal in the early 1990s. Sindhi traders who has lived in Kurtal now for more than 2 decades told me, he said, and I quote, "We in Dubai know Kurtal in Shaoxing municipality since the late 1990s. During that time, we already came to China very often. Every year, we would take part in the Guangdong Fair, Guangzhou Hui. At the fair, we came to know many Chinese fabric suppliers were from Kurtal in Zhejiang province." End quote. During their initial and short business trips, the Sindhi traders came to know that it was indeed easier to find more kinds of fabrics at the lowest price in Kurtal. But then, fabrics factories and shops were highly centralized in Kurtal and nearby industrial towns such as Jiaxing and Hangzhou. And the numbers of them have already surpassed many other production markets in other parts of Asia. That is, to me, no surprise that after the fabric markets collapsed in South Korea in the 1990s, Indian traders immediately shift their business bases from South Korea to China, and particularly to Kurtal. Throughout the 1990s and the early 2000s, there were about 100 Indian trading companies in Kurtal, with most of them having Dubai as their major export market. And since then, a steadily increasing numbers of Indian traders coming to Kurtal could be observed between the late 1990s and 2012. Let us now have a closer look into this graph that I'm going to show in the next slide. Here on the graph, you can find the numbers of Indians who came to Kurtal between 2006 and 2013. Some of the most remarkable number can be found between 2007 and 2012. As we know, there was a global financial crisis in 2007. The international trade economy was hit very hard, which in turn triggered worldwide recessions in the global trade. The fabric trade in Qatar was also affected, but it quickly bounced back to the pre-crisis level in 2009 and have even grown since that time. Between 2007 and 2010, the total number of Indians staying in Qatar has increased by 50%, rising from 4,542 to 9,118. And the numbers becomes quite steadily between 2010 and 2012, which was the time when I conducted my first phase of fieldwork. Despite the fact that they come from different regions of India, most of them, as I mentioned before, are Sindhis. When I asked how they got their job, there were many responses, such as my uncle gave me that job, and they got these opportunities while taking part in the family events, such as a wedding party. These meetings occurred in a wide variety of places, including a Sikh temple in rural town of Haryana in India, a wedding parties in the suburb of Mumbai in India, a pilgrimage tour in Haridwar in India, an Indian restaurants in Dubai, a hotel launch in Bangkok, so on and so forth. What these locations have in common is that they are all communal places and public spheres that most Sindhis and the extended or joint family members meet because of religious and social reasons. In other words, the expansions of transnational Sindhi business and recruitment of diasporic laborers goes hands in hands with the long-term maintenance of kinship network and connections. While such individual case indicate the ways in which one Sindhi family firm has been organized transnationally, it doesn't explain much about how these Sindhi families come together in Qatar as one group and why they behave in such a way, showing their belongings to one ethnic and diasporic community in China. For instance, over hundreds of Sindhis would take part in the Sunday religious congregations in the Sikh temple, as well as the annual religious celebrations, such as Holi, which is the time now, Diwali and Chati Chand, presenting themselves as one community, despite the fact that they are working for different family businesses in the global textile industries. In fact, I would say it's precisely the questions that the early scholarships cannot quite answer. That is how the trading diasporic community come together in one place, notwithstanding the internal power differences and diversities in terms of operating capital, credibility, class, age, etc., and the conflicting business interests while they are working in the same trading market. In other words, how do the grassroots and non-elite members of the diaspora also manage to mobilize transnational capital in financing the global fabric trade? So now quickly move on to Part C. I will explore these important questions by ethnographically mapping out the three key fundraising mechanisms which are intersecting formal and informal transactions operated by Indian traders in Dubai and China through their transnational Indian trading network. I will show how the two mechanisms in Dubai remain structurally exclusive to the elite members of the Indian diaspora, while the one in China has been more open to non-elite members of the diaspora. Drawing on the comparisons of these three fundraising mechanisms, I illustrate how China has played a historically specific and very important role in consolidating the Indian diasporic traders in Qatar, helping them to overcome the internal diversities and differences and the multiple power inequality within the transnational diasporic community. Yeah, number one, the first fundraising mechanism is what is known as credit kiting and invoice discounting in Dubai. In Dubai, credit kiting, as my interlocutor described it, is the main way for buyers to finance export deals, especially when they do not have enough funds at the very beginning of the deal making. In the language of finance, kiting is usually described as a fraudulent activities through which credit can be produced despite a person's lack of money or funds to pay back the loan. The origin of the term comes from the metaphor that there is no money supporting a kite, just air. And credit card kiting, for instance, using one credit card to pay the bill of another card without actually having the money, is one of the most common examples of kiting. However, among my interlocutors, kiting is simply known as a fundraising strategy with no moral problems, and it involves a careful cultivation of money and commodity flows to ensure the money chain will never be broken and that they can always pay their creditors, which are the formal banking services in Dubai. Yeah, as you could imagine, kiting can be a highly complex, like money circulating practices. But this example that I'm going to show here, which is based on the cases I've collected with some details simplified, hope that I can show how it generally works. This is illustrated through this graphic I have created. So the story goes, goods arrived in Dubai, but trader D1 hasn't made the full payment to the Chinese suppliers. Indian traders D1 resell the goods to another Indian trader D2 on a 60-day letter of credit, LC, which is, as you can see, is a bogus deal. On the 30th date or before, which was 20th date in the graphic, trader D1 discounts the invoice to get a quick bank loan in Dubai. In this way, trader D1 generates incomes to pay the Chinese suppliers, which can only be a late payment. Trader D2, an associate of trader A, can resell the goods, an associate of trader D1 can resell the goods to a third party in generating more income for both him and the trader D1s. Then they can also pay the loans back to the bank. Making kiting bank credits without breaking the money chains requires great skills in curating the transfer of a large amount of informal and formal capital, creations of valid documents, and selling the actually existing goods in order to ensure the business look as legitimate as possible to the bank. So in most cases, it is the elite Indian traders having more manpower, resources, and owning a big companies who are more capable of kiting credits in Dubai. By stark contrast, it is extremely difficult for the banks in Dubai to give credits to small-scale Indian trading companies and the undercapitalizing traders. Indeed, Indian traders who lack operating capital always fund their applications for invoice discounting and other kinds of loan applications rejected by the banks in Dubai, given their generally very low credit rating. So now the second fundraising mechanisms, informal value transfer, Hawala. Hawala is known as the informal value transfer system that has been widely used in the Middle East and South Asia for over several centuries. In many ways, Hawala can be known as a grassroots level money transfer systems that work on mutual trust, but not so much on the existence of a central banking authorities. My observations reveal that in most instances, Indian traders simply utilize their knowledge of the export tax rebates. In practice, Hawala involves a money sending agent notifying a receiving agent that they have accepted a certain amount of funds from a sender and authorizing the receiving agent to pay the amount of money to the receiver. The receiving agent usually pays the receiver in local currency, such as RMB in China, according to the agreed exchange rate in the black market, less the agent's commissions. So as you see on the slide, that I have tried to show it more graphically, and also based on what I have just presented it. Hawala allows for the money transfer of funds transregionally and transnationally without producing any invoice and documents. It facilitates tax avoidance and money laundering. And so for these reasons, Hawala is largely seen as illegal by different regulatory authorities in the Middle East, South Asia, and China. After Hawala became illegalized and criminalized, many Indian traders have tried as much as they could avoid using Hawala or Hundi services. Indian traders, as I found, are highly reluctant to handle a large amount of Hawala money in and through Curtown. This is because including Hawala money in an international trade transactions will increase the cash buyout burden on the Indian traders. That is, Chinese suppliers will not accept direct Hawala payment given the considerable risks. What suppliers would do instead is to require Indian traders to first convert the Hawala money into clean and whitened money. Therefore, only elite Indian traders who are capable of mobilizing a large sum of US dollars cash in China and Dubai will be able to fabricate transaction records that look legitimate to the bank and the regulatory bodies in China, Dubai, and India. Furthermore, there has been nationwide crackdown on Hawala and other forms of shadow banking services in China, India, and the Middle East over the previous several years. It also makes Hawala money transfer riskier and more riskier than before. But nonetheless, in the third fundraising mechanism that I'm going to show you now, the export rebates in China, 出口退税, which has been widely practiced in Curtown, and it completes the stories. And the stories about export rebates in China is radically different from what I have just presented in terms of Hawala, in terms of the credit kiting. While in credit kiting, the Chinese formal banking sectors are no less lenient than the ones in Dubai. The Chinese government's sustained interventions in developing the low-end trading sectors in Southeast China, as I will show here, has made a unique differences here. One such intervention has been the state-sponsored economy of export tax rebate in China. Since its implementations in 1994, the export tax rebate policy is decided to support exports and is reserved exclusively for local Chinese companies, especially the small and medium-sized companies with less capacity to develop international businesses. In Curtown, it is very common for the small-scale Chinese companies to over-invoice their export, so they can make more money. The figure on the slide illustrates two versions of such an export deal. In Path A, which is the clean versions of the deal, the Chinese company received the 2.4 yuan rebate from the SAT for every fabric meter sold. It resulted in an income of 240,000 yuan. In Part B, which is the over-invoiced and the fabricated versions, the Chinese suppliers received 3.36 yuan from the rebate scheme. an additional 0.96 yuan per fabric meter, amounting to 96,000 yuan on top of the legitimately invoiced rebates. This amount does not include the cost of soliciting the fake invoice, which, as my Chinese interlocutors told me, is not very large. One of them further remarked, he said, and I quote, "Even if we lose money from the export deal, it doesn't quite matter. As long as we can still make money from the export rebate, everything will be just fine," end quote. Indian traders cannot directly claim export rebates because most do not have the required license. However, they still find ways to get a share of both legitimately invoiced and the over-invoiced exported rebates. In fact, leveraging these transactions to get financial benefits from formal export support policies in China is neither risky nor especially difficult for small-scale, long-elite Indian businesses. This is mainly because the bureaucratic process of invoicing and over-invoicing to claim export rebates is the responsibility of the Chinese companies or the Chinese suppliers. And my observations reveal that in most instances, Indian traders simply utilize, make use of their knowledge of export tax rebates as a local knowledge, and the ease with which suppliers can overclaim to bargain harder with the suppliers. The Sydney traders are well aware that even if the Chinese suppliers lose money on some aspect of the deal making, they can still profit overall thanks to the government's export tax rebate scheme. For instance, Sydney traders may negotiate for a buying price lower than the production cost, ask for a higher rate of commissions, or request a gift. One such compensation package includes a Chinese suppliers paying a full year of office rent for an Indian traders in Kershaw. And more commonly, Indian traders will always receive gift money from Chinese suppliers in the form of cash, WeChat digital money, or bank transfer to their Chinese bank accounts. So to sum up, this invoice economy, as I put it, has created a larger space for a collaborative and collective business survivals among the grassroots players, especially the Sydney traders, who may not have enough capital available when they initiate a deal with the Chinese suppliers. In turn, the Indian traders, as a group of trading diaspora with vast internal differences and diversities in terms of class, age, local knowledge, and wealth, they managed to stay together and even expand the size of their diasporic communities in Southeast China. So now, just some very brief concluding remarks. Number one, as my presentation trying to show, despite but also because of its irregular and illegitimate nature, the circulations of funny money, including the Hawala money and the credit kiting money and the export rebate money, facilitate a low-cost fabric trade between China and Dubai. Funny money circulations are concluded within and around regulatory frameworks set up by the state and financial authorities, and are sustained by the real movement of low-cost commodities through the Indian trading network and its diasporic connections. Number two, funny money circulations and transactions exploited institutional inconsistencies that fails to fully govern money transfer and transformations, and in the process often have a rather surprising positive effect on the international trade, especially in terms of redistributing power and wealth on a broad social and economic scale. It is indeed very remarkable that the funny money transactions take place despite the structural and institutional forces seeking to oppress or even eliminate this informal and formal money circulations mechanisms created by the diasporic traders. So my paper illustrated that, number 3, my paper trying to illustrate that the circulations of irregular and illegitimate money, such as the funding money, that would be impossible to be entirely whipped out in today's globalizations, is important and deserve more scholarly attentions because it highlights how small and individual traders, players, and stakeholders in the economy, global economy, survive and thrive outside or even within the existing power inequalities in the international trade and global supply chain. Yeah, obviously, I think I couldn't cover all the details about the funding money circulations mechanisms facilitated by the Indian Diasporic Trading Network, but I have tried my best. If you are interested to know more about the nuance and the details of it, yeah, recently I've just published this work in American Behavioral Scientists, and it just came out, I think, last month. And I also will have 2 articles for comment, which will also focus on related topics on diasporic convergencies and indifferent survivals and the formations of inter-Asia's Hindu diasporic diasporic religious practices. Yeah, they will be coming out very soon in different different publications outlets. So yeah, if you are interested, I will be very happy to share with you. Just send me an email. I think I will stop here. Once again, thank you very much for being here with me, and I'm very looking forward to the comments and critiques and questions coming from you. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. Yeah, thank you very much, Kakin, for this wonderful talk. So as I said, we have now some time for questions and answers. So if you have any questions, please just post them or submit them through the Q&A button in Zoom. So maybe I can start us off. Wonderfully, really interesting work and interesting talk. I wonder whether you can, you've talked a bit about the Chinese side of things and the Chinese suppliers, but I wonder whether you can talk a bit more about the Chinese businesses that are involved in Keqiao or on the Chinese side, and how important for them in terms of their overall business these Indian trade networks actually are. Because I don't know, from my sort of perspective as a business historian, I would always think, so why doesn't the Chinese company at some point grow that big that they would just eliminate the Indian trading network and establish a subsidiary in Dubai themselves and basically integrate the whole supply chain? That would sort of be my question. And I guess important to that would be what the Chinese business side basically looks like. So yeah, I was wondering whether you could say a bit more about that.
Yeah, thank you for your questions, Gasant. Yeah, so I think it is of course, very important, right? The stories couldn't be completed without knowing the ethnographic details about the Chinese business enterprise and traders and entrepreneurs in Keqiao. And based on my research, most of those Chinese most of the Chinese suppliers that I could find in Keqiao are individual entrepreneurs or individual traders. So their business scales is relatively small. Maybe their company has only a few staff, and most of the staff are also their family members or friends who study in the same school. And many of them come from nearby regions, including Wenzhou, Jiaxing, Shanghai. So the local Chinese businesses is also very interesting. Yeah, it's not only about local businesses formations, but it also comes from the internal migrations network that many other Chinese practitioners move from one place to another because there are more business opportunities in Keqiao. But the basic demographic sort of information about them is, yeah, they are relatively small. So they don't usually have means to access the international trading markets. They don't speak very well English. Now, of course, they have picked up some English speaking capabilities and capacities, but before, say 20 years ago, yeah, they couldn't speak English very well. They hardly know anything about the fabric market in Dubai. So it was more about the individual Indian traders coming to this small part of China and bridging the small traders and the small suppliers in Kurtao with the international trading markets in the Middle East. So the story is very interesting because, yeah, despite the fact that they are Chinese and Indians and coming from different parts of the world, and they hardly share anything common in terms of social economic background, educational level, etc. But their business profiles is very similar. They are not operating large scale corporations. They have very limited startup capital when they just kickstart their businesses. So that is precisely the reason why they come together, because they need each other in order to connect the global circuits of the low cost commodity circulations. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. That's great. We have got a first question, and that question comes from Johanna von Petzold, and she asks, what kind or styles of fabrics are mainly traded in this particular case, and who are the consumers of the fabrics that are traded?
Thank you for your questions, Joanna. Yeah, so as I mentioned in the talk, fabrics, known as mian in Chinese, is semi-finished textile products. So it's not the clothes that I'm wearing today, but the raw materials that would be used to make clothes or other finished products of textiles. So Kurtao is only a very small part of the global supply chain of textile trading. So the usual story is like, yeah, China make the fabrics, and then the fabrics is exported from Kurtao to Sri Lanka, Middle East, or Africa. And in the factories there, they turn the fabrics into clothes. And then those clothes will be re-exported to the consumer, the final consumer markets, perhaps sometimes in the global south, but some also you can find quite a number of them going to the Americans and the Western European markets. So in terms of the whole stories of the global supply chain, yeah. So Kurtao is like right in the middle. So it's leader from the very beginning of the global supply chain, but it's also not so directly connected to the end side of the global supply chain of textile industries. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. The next question comes from Jackie Amayo. The question is, are there major differences between the Indian trader community in Kurtao and in EU? And if yes, what might be the basis of these differences? Are there any Indian traders who have graduated from Chinese universities? And has the community in Kurtao had any issues with the quote-unquote kidnapping of traders to force payments?
Good questions, yeah, and thank you for this question, Jackie. Where should I start? So if for those of you who don't know, Yiwu, Yiwu is another very interesting international trading city. It's not very far away from Kurtao, in which now is known as the world supermarket, because most of the small commodity we use today is like pens or stationaries, small items. Many of them are traded in the gigantic wholesale marketplaces in Yiwu. And Yiwu is also one of the most internationalizing sort of like hub for Middle Easterners, South Asians to be based as like brokers, traders, because that is the major place that international trade take place between China and the global South. And so in this regard, the Indian traders in Yiwu are not so much different from the Indians in Kurtao. But based on my ethnographic comparison, because I've also done some work in Yiwu, I found out that most of the Indians in Yiwu are more individually based, which means they are more sojournings. Of course, not all, but a large majority of the Indian traders I met is they would just come to Yiwu maybe once or twice a year and then source the item by placing the order in site. And because all those items are in stock already, and then it is just like going to a shop, buy things, and then ship it out. And so this is a relatively simple model of trading, right? You just bring the money, or actually maybe you don't have the money, but you go to the shops, place an order, and then ask a logistic company to do to help you to ship the things out, and or you can just get a suitcase and put all the things in the suitcase and bring it back to your country. Yeah, that kind of itinerary traders are quite a majority among the Indian traders I met in Yiwu. But in Kertao, a majority of the Indians are not as transient as those whom I found in Yiwu. In Kertao, the Indian traders will always rent an office, and they will also try to spend as much money as they could in order to secure a long-term residency visa, because they see that as a strong reasons to for them to stay in China as long as they wish. And I think it going back to the stories I have presented, right? The export rebate. If you are not in China, it's very difficult for you to negotiate with the factories and the suppliers for share in such an informalized economy, like getting a share from the export rebate scheme. So in just a very general comparisons, the Indian traders in Yiwu are more transients, more itinerants, and the Indian traders in Kertao are usually more permanently based, despite the fact that they also face a lot of challenges when they're trying to secure a long-term visa. So there has been a lot of stories about the Indians in Yiwu, right? I think it's all on headline news at once that Indian traders was kidnapped because they couldn't pay the factories in time and on time, and there was quite a lot of that kind of story circulating both in the local market and also in the transnational market, that Indian traders should not go to Yiwu because it's a very dangerous place, that they don't do business very honestly. And then the factories we also kidnap them if they cannot pay their debts. But I think it has so much to do, right? So much to do with the very specific or special modes of business operations among the Indians, most of the Indians in Yiwu, in which their business are more transient, more one time off. So sometimes if you place an order and then on credit, that trader would disappear. And that kind of transientness of the Indian trading practices that I have found in Yiwu, I think has so much to do, right? With that kind of circulations of stories that Indian traders will always get in trouble when they're trying to strike a business deals with the Chinese suppliers in Yiwu. But in Kertao, not as much as what you will hear about Yiwu. So I think that one of the very interesting side of the story is all these kind of stereotypical sort of imaginations about Indians always come from Yiwu, but not from Kertao. But despite the fact that you have more Indian traders in Kertao than in Yiwu as permanent based or more permanent based middleman traders. So thank you very much. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. The next question comes from Li Xing. And the question is, or the comment is rather, thank you, Kakin, for sharing your research. Is it difficult for the Sindhi traders in China to move money between their Chinese bank, WeChat account, and the international informal payment platforms like Hawala? I'm curious to learn how the traders negotiate between different financial systems in different states. Thank you.
Yeah. Let me see where I should start, because there has several components there that are not only about China but also related to other places that Indians have built up their business connections and cultivate their business practices. I think one of the key finding from my research that hopefully will address to your question is because in China, cash economy and WeChat digital money economy is fairly common for small amounts of money transactions in the informal trading sectors. So it was quite surprising, right? Because maybe from the mainstream sort of imaginations, foreigners always have a lot of difficulties to use WeChat, because now every part of your life in China will be so much closely related to how well you use your WeChat, because it's about your payments, it's about how you connect with your business partners and all kinds of lives. Now in the time of COVID, whether you have a green QR code, that will be the major documents they have to show to the authorities that I can move around. So yeah, mobile phones payments and apps become so important, right? As a new generations of social life in China, and yeah, maybe the mainstream imaginations of how foreigners get used to it is already very difficult. But based on my ethnographic observations in Kertao, yeah, the Indian traders have get used to it very, very fast. Not necessarily because that it has been so much structurally embedded into the social lives of everyone in China, but rather, yeah, digital money, red pocket money, a few hundred RMBs or 1,000, not more than 1,000, very small amount of like money can be easily circulated, between the Chinese suppliers and the Indian traders. But this kind of apps and this kind of like small banking services is not so much available. For example, say like in India, and say like in the Middle East. So such a digitalizations of the Chinese economy somehow has a lot of like benefits for the Indian non-elite Indian members. To get access to the very localized sort of like informal gift exchange economy between suppliers and traders. So I think in particular, China has a very interesting part to play in it, in which it is not as restrictive, or it is not as like unwelcoming to foreigners. Because in Dubai, yeah, if you don't have a visa, it's very difficult for you to even open a bank account. But in China, of course not now, because now it become more restrictive. But I was talking about like a few years ago, it was relatively easy for them to open a bank account, to get a WeChat account, and then transfer money back and forth on their WeChat digital pocket. So I think as far as I was, so it has a lot of positive influences on the ways in which how the non-elite Indian traders are trying to survive in this very competitive textile trading industries.
Okay, thank you. The next question comes from Rayesh Panhathodi. The question is, what elements played out in creating a Sindhi stronghold in the textile industry in China? Could you talk about any competing Indian communities or groups in the textile business?
Thank you very much. The major strengths of Sindhis, of course not all, but for most of the Sindhis traders I have known, they always do business within the network of global Sindhi family business connections. So I was talking about the stories among the Sindhi traders who have done a lot of trade between China and Dubai, right? And it is not from China to India, mostly because they have a very interesting sort of like remigration history from India to Dubai in the 1960s and the 1970s. And it was the beginning of their stories and how they have become so globalized in terms of their family connections and business networks. And this particular type of globalizing and globalized family network has become a very unique advantages, because not so many Indians from India would now they found a huge difficulties to enter the Dubai market, because Dubai market has been sort of like dominated by the long time engagement by some old Sindhi diasporic traders who have come to that place in the 1970s and the 1960s. So it become quite a niche, a transnational ethnic niche economy that only exclusively reserved by such a expansive and ever expanding Sindhi business networks between China and Dubai, and not necessarily between China and India. And so for other Indian traders who are non-Sindhis, they will usually just do direct like trade businesses between China and their home country or their home state. So you could find quite a few Gujarati traders who keep trading a small volumes of fabrics between China and Gujarat, but not like on a much larger global scale. And there are also a sizable Pakistani community in Kertao, and they have been doing a lot of trade between China, Kertao in particular, and Peshawar, a borderland region between Pakistan and Afghanistan. And most of those Pakistani traders that I can find in Kertao, they are all Pashto speaking people. So they are a very unique type of Pakistani community who have been doing a lot of transnational and translocal business, but with mostly with direct link between the between China and their home country Pakistan, or the country nearby like Central Asian states and Afghanistan. So in that sense, I think that Cindy is very interesting because it seems to me they are more global and transnational. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, thank you. The next question comes from Tianshi, and the question is about the current state of things during the pandemic. So the question is, thank you, Kakin, for sharing your detailed research. I'm wondering whether there's any change for this India-China middleman trade during the pandemic.
Thank you very much. Of course, I mean, pandemic has changed all of our life, right? Not only the traders, but all of us. So there has been quite a lot of unwanted implications, right? I mean, for the local and the transnational textile industries. And one of the major issues that many Indian traders have been facing now is it is extremely difficult to enter Chinese borders. As you know now, China has zero COVID policies, and you hardly have any international flights flying into China because they want to keep COVID as the number of COVID cases as minimum as possible. So it is not necessarily because they have becoming more restrictive in giving a visa. Yeah, it's still okay and possible for you to apply for business visas, but somehow you have no international flights coming from outside to China, and it makes moving into China physically become quite impossible at the moment. Remarkably, when you remember pandemic started in China in 2020, around the time of February and January. And in usual cases, elite Indian traders who have money, who have capital, yeah, that was the time like a Chinese New Year, right? So for those people who can afford international trips, they will always go back to India to spend a holiday with families during the Chinese New Year holiday, because that would be the only time that they don't have to work. And yeah, in 2020, a lot of Indians moved, not a lot, but for those rich and wealthy Indians, they moved out from China originally just for a short holiday, but it turns out that they could not come back because the rest is history. But you know that after that we have the outbreak of the disease and the virus, and China closed the border, and it was almost impossible, I mean, for people to go back to China. But during the same time, a lot of non-elite Indian members couldn't leave the country because they don't have capitals and monies. So usually they would just spend some lonely time with a few friends in Kecoh or in Yiwu or in Shanghai during the Chinese New Year holidays. Yeah, just to keep themselves up, you know. I mean, it was quite poor that you cannot go home during the holiday. But it accidentally turned out that many Indians managed to remain in China after the beginning of the pandemic, and the non-elite member become more entrusted as a consequence to continue the transnational business between India, China, and Dubai, mostly because this non-elite group of Indian diaspora are the only Indians who managed to stay in the local Chinese textile market. So there has been, of course, I have not been there for quite a long time because of the restrictions of international travel. But based on my conversation with various interlocutors, it seems like now the non-elite members become even more influential than before because they are the ones who manage to stay, and the elite members also have to rely on the services of these Indian traders in order to get access to the things that are only exclusively reserved for the Chinese. So interestingly, maybe we imagine that pandemic has changed a lot of things in a negative way. But when you're looking into the trade volume, for instance, yeah, it has been increasing from time to time from Yiwu and from Kecoh to the world. So the economy is still very strong in many ways. And for the Indians members who are not so rich, yeah, somehow they found a way to survive and even have improved their life to certain extents.
If I
Yeah,
can
thank
jump
you.
in here, it's quite telling that these networks, financial networks, have proven to be so resilient. Even during times of COVID, you would expect a lot
Yeah.
of disruptions, but your description seems like they just keep going. So this has been going on for a while now. So if you were to look at the long history of this trade, the early period with all the bootstrapping devices that they came up with, that's totally reasonable. Can we get a sense of how profitable or consistent such trades might be, and if that has engendered some more lasting forms of exchange or networks because the capital needs to sit somewhere if there's profit to be made. So where is it sitting now, and has that created some forms of institutions that are a little bit more formal and a little bit more lasting than what they started with?
Yeah, John, yeah, this is a very important question because the historical dimension, the longer term historical dimension, of course, is extremely influential, right? I mean, to examine the longer term consequences of this very sort of like specific and particularistic money circulations mechanisms. Because it's still evolving, so I don't think I have a very concluding answer in this regard. But based on my observations, also comparisons with the more classic studies on money transfer mechanisms facilitated by the Indian diasporas in Southeast Asia, in South Asia, and in the Indian Oceans. Yeah, it has been just ongoing despite several colonial, post-colonial, global capitalist force always trying to undo that kind of grassroots levels of money transfer mechanism. So, for instance, Hawala and Hundi, as I presented in the paper, yeah. Now, I think just a few days ago, yeah, Dubai in UAE, the regulatory body has given a very serious warning to the local banking industry that they have not done enough to crack down the circulations of mad money. But of course, I mean, on the surface, when you hear this news, oh, maybe that would be no future for Hawala and Hundi. But to the local traders, they just laugh it off and life as usual. Yeah. So in China now, there's also a serious crackdown, right, by the central banking authorities on Tengxin, because they said that they accused Tengxin and WeChat of just enabling, I mean, so much like informal value transfers, shadow bankings, and informal value transfers through the use of WeChat pocket money. And there has been a huge fine as far as I remember the news. I think that the news was just coming out like a few days ago. But if they couldn't use WeChat money, they can still use cash, right? So in a way, I think this kind of like how to say interventions, structural interventions from the formal and state level institutions. I mean, hoping to undo the long-term existence of informal value transfer is always very unsuccessful. And so so it's quite speculative, I would say, but based on my ongoing ethnographic observations, I don't see there has been a decreased level of resiliency and flexibility that have been exhibited by this kind of like informal value transfer mechanisms and practices that cultivated by the grassroots level traders. So I think we still need a lot more historical and ethnographic materials to prove it or disprove it. But as an anthropologist, I see everyday life just as usual, despite the fact that now we have a very interesting time of living our life under an ongoing global pandemic. Yeah.
Fascinating. Thanks very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm cognizant of the time. We've kept you for quite a long time already, and unless there's any final questions, I think what remains for me, Kakin, is to thank you very much for taking the time to give us such a wonderful talk and share with us some of the fascinating research you're doing, and also for so patiently answering all of our questions. Before I sign off, I should mention that the next lecture in the Delta on the Move lecture series will be taking place on the 4th of May. And then we are very happy to welcome Dr. Dennis Ho from Yale University, and she will be talking about, or the title of her talk is Oyster Man and Refugee, Hong Kong and China Between the Tides, 1949 to 1997. And we will, as always, advertise that through email, our website, social media, and so on. So please have a look out for that. But once again, Kakin, thank you very much for the wonderful talk, and we certainly all look forward to learning more about your research in the future. So thank you very much, and thank you to all of you for tuning in.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for all the questions and the comments and the critiques. I highly appreciate it while I'm trying to revise my work.
Yeah, thank you very much. All right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right.
Good. I wish all of you have a good day.
Yeah, you too. All right.